She helped a stranger in the rain. He turned out to be the CEO interviewing her tomorrow. The rain didn't just fall, it waged war on the city. It was a cold, relentless assault, turning the once vibrant streets of downtown into a blurry watercolor of gray and neon. For Elara, each drop felt like a tiny hammer striking against her dwindling hope. Clutched in her arms, wrapped in a now sodden plastic bag, was her entire future, a portfolio of architectural designs, the culmination of 5 years of sleepless nights, sacrificed weekends, and a dream she inherited from her late mother. Welcome back to CJ Stories, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's dive into today's story. Tomorrow was the interview. Not just an interview, but the interview. Vance and Sterling Architecture. The Giants. The Kingmakers. A junior architect position. There wasn't just a job, it was a coronation. And Elara, with a 2-year gap on her resume from when she'd put her career on hold to care for her mom, knew this was her only shot. The portfolio had to be perfect. Pristine. A gust of wind, cruel and mocking, ripped her flimsy umbrella from her grasp, sending it tumbling down the street like a broken bird. A soft cry escaped her lips. She was soaked, her hair plastered to her face, and a cold dread seeped into her bones. Defeated, she huddled under the meager shelter of a storefront awning, watching her one chance at a future get further and further away. It was then she saw him. He was standing under the awning of the building across the street, looking just as lost as she felt. He was tall, dressed in a suit that was probably worth more than her entire wardrobe, but it was now darkened and heavy with rain. He had no coat, no umbrella, and he stared out into the deluge with a strange, contemplative stillness. He wasn't shivering from the cold, but from something deeper. He looked weary. Like he was carrying the weight of the whole concrete and glass city on his shoulders. Something in her, the same part that had stayed by her mother's bedside reading aloud for hours, the part that always put the last cookie back, stirred. Her brain screamed at her. Protect the portfolio. It's all you have. But her heart, a stubborn, foolish organ, whispered something else. Taking a deep breath, Elara made a choice. She hugged the portfolio tightly to her chest with one arm, tilted it as best she could to shield it, and sprinted across the street, the traffic lights painting her in fleeting strokes of red and green. She reached him, breathless, water dripping from her nose and chin. He looked up, startled, his eyes a surprising shade of gray, like a stormy sky just before the sun breaks through. "You look like you needed this more than I did," she said, her voice trembling slightly from the cold. She wasn't offering an umbrella, that was long gone. She was offering her own body as a shield, standing in front of him, taking the brunt of the wind-whipped rain that the awning couldn't block. He was silent for a moment, just watching her. A woman, drenched and clearly in a rush, stopping to shield a complete stranger. A flicker of something, surprise? Gratitude? Intrigue, crossed his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and rich. "That's unnecessarily kind." "It's a nasty night to be caught out," she replied, managing a small smile. "Believe me, I know." She gestured with her head towards her portfolio. "This is my whole life in a bag. I've got the interview of a lifetime tomorrow." "Ah," he said, a knowing look in his eyes. "Chasing a dream?" "Something like that," she said, a wave of melancholy washing over her. "Or maybe just trying to prove to the person who inspired it that I didn't give up." His gaze softened. "The best dreams are the ones we carry for others." He looked up at the towering skyscrapers disappearing into the low-hanging clouds. "My father built half of this skyline. He always said that buildings aren't just steel and glass. They're containers for human stories. For hope." The words struck a chord deep within Elara. It was what her mother used to say. That a home wasn't the walls, but the love inside them. "Your father sounds like a wise man," she said softly. "He was," the stranger replied, a distant look in his eyes. "He left some very large shoes to fill." A taxi, its light a beacon of gold in the gloom, pulled up to the curb. The stranger's focus snapped back to her. "That's me. Listen," he fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a sleek, black wallet. "Oh, no, please," Elara said, shaking her head. "I didn't do it for money." He paused, looking at her intently again, as if truly seeing her for the first time. He put the wallet away. "Of course you didn't." He hesitated, then reached out and gently brushed a stray, wet strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was brief, electric, and sent a jolt of warmth through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "Good luck with your interview," he said, his voice sincere. "I have a feeling you'll build something that lasts." And with that, he slipped into the cab and was gone, swallowed by the rain and the night. Ilara stood there for a moment, the rain not feeling quite so cold anymore. She had no idea who he was. Just a kind stranger who spoke of dreams and legacies. But for the first time all day, she felt a flicker of real, unadulterated hope. Question for you. When faced with a choice between protecting your own dream and showing a moment of selfless kindness to a stranger, what do you think truly reveals a person's character? What would you have done in Ilara's shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're already feeling connected to Ilara's journey, don't forget to subscribe for the next act. Ilara's apartment was a testament to her life's current state, small, tidy, but with an undercurrent of organized chaos. Blueprints were tacked to one wall, a mosaic of ambition. A single, beautiful orchid sat on the windowsill, a living memory of her mother, who had a gift for making things grow. The portfolio lay open on her small dining table, each page a prisoner under the weight of heavy books, a desperate attempt to flatten the water-warped edges. The damage wasn't catastrophic, the plastic bag had done its job, mostly, but it wasn't perfect. A faint, wavy ripple marred the corner of her proudest design, a community library inspired by the structure of a beehive, a space meant for collaboration and warmth. It felt like a bad omen. She sank into a chair, the adrenaline from the street encounter fading, leaving behind the familiar ache of anxiety. Self-doubt, a cold and patient predator, began to circle. They'll see the water damage and think you're careless. They'll look at the 2-year gap on your resume and toss it in the bin. You're not good enough for Vance and Sterling. You were never good enough. She traced the name on the pristine white business card the recruiter had given her. Julian Vance. CEO. The name itself felt heavy, monolithic. She pictured a man in his late 60s, with a stern face and a gaze that could dissect a person's soul and find it wanting. The son of the legendary founder, Sterling Vance. The man the stranger in the rain had spoken of. The man with the very large shoes to fill. Ilara's own shoes felt so small. She had spent 2 years changing bedpans, managing medications, and holding a frail hand, whispering stories of the buildings they would one day design together. She didn't regret a single second of it. It was the most important work she had ever done. But the world of corporate ambition didn't see it that way. In their eyes, it wasn't experience, it was a void. She got up and walked to her bedroom, pulling a small, worn wooden box from her closet. Inside was her mother's old architect's scale, a few cherished photos, and a letter, the paper soft with age. It was the letter her mom had written her when she'd first gotten into architecture school. "My darling Ilara," it began. "Never forget that what you are building is more than just a structure. You are building a feeling. A sanctuary. A memory. Don't just design with your mind, design with your whole heart. That is where the true soul of a building lives." Tears welled in Ilara's eyes. She clutched the letter to her chest. The stranger's words from earlier came back to her, an echo of her mother's sentiment: buildings aren't just steel and glass. They're containers for human stories. For hope. A sudden, fierce wave of determination washed away the doubt. What was she so afraid of? Rejection? She had faced far worse. She had watched the brightest light in her life fade away, and she had survived. She had held her own heart together when it felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. An interview, even one with the formidable Julian Vance, was just a conversation. She would not go in there apologizing for the life she had lived. She would not hide the story of those 2 years. It was a part of her, as integral to her designs as any line or angle. It was the why behind her work. It was the soul. With renewed purpose, she returned to the portfolio. The faint ripple on the page no longer looked like a flaw. It looked like a scar. A mark of a battle fought and won. A reminder of a rainy night, a kind stranger, and an act of kindness that had rekindled her own fire. She carefully put the pages back in order, closed the portfolio, and set out her best suit, simple, elegant, professional. She wasn't just going to an interview to get a job. She was going to show them who she was, a woman who understood that the strongest foundations are built not just on concrete, but on character. Question for you: self-doubt can be a powerful enemy. Have you ever had a moment where a memory or a few words from someone else gave you the strength to face a monumental challenge? Share your story in the comments. Your encouragement might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you're enjoying this, you know what to do: hit that subscribe button. The lobby of the Vance and Sterling building was designed to intimidate. It was a cathedral of modernism, with soaring ceilings, floors of polished black marble that reflected the sky, and a chilling, minimalist silence that seemed to absorb all sound. The air smelled of money and ambition. Ilara felt her carefully constructed confidence begin to shrink. The other candidates in the waiting area looked like they were born for this world. Their suits were sharper, their briefcases were sleeker, and their smiles were a little too bright. Ilara clutched her portfolio, her scarred, imperfect portfolio, and focused on her breathing, just as her mom had taught her. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3. Elara Martin? A chic receptionist with a headset that seemed surgically attached to her ear called her name. This was it. She was led down a long, white hallway, the only sound the soft click of her sensible heels against the marble. The hallway opened into a reception area outside a massive office. The walls were glass, looking out over the city. It was a staggering view, a king's view. The city she had been drenched in last night was now a beautiful, sprawling map at her feet. The door to the office was slightly ajar. The receptionist gestured towards it. "Mr. Vance is ready for you." Her heart hammered against her ribs. Julian Vance. The son of the legend. She took one last deep breath, pushed the heavy glass door open, and stepped inside. The office was vast, dominated by a desk of dark, reclaimed wood that looked like a piece of art. But Elara didn't see the desk. She didn't see the priceless art on the walls or the panoramic view of the skyline. She only saw the man standing by the window, his back to her, looking out at the city. He was tall. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, and as he turned around, the light from the window caught his features. It was him. The stranger from the rain. The world tilted on its axis. The air left her lungs in a silent whoosh. It couldn't be. The kind, weary man with the stormy gray eyes and the soft-spoken words about his father, he was Julian Vance? The CEO? Every nightmare scenario she had ever conceived for this interview paled in comparison to this reality. He wasn't a stern, 60-year-old titan of industry. He was him. The man she had shielded from the rain. The man whose cheek she had seen his hand brush. The man to whom she had confessed that her portfolio was her entire life. His eyes, those same unforgettable gray eyes, widened in a flash of recognition. The professional, composed mask of a CEO slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing the man who had stood under the awning. A complex mix of astonishment, amusement, and something else she couldn't quite name played across his face. A slow smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes, formed on his lips. He glanced down at the resume on his desk, then back up at her, his gaze intense. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "Elara Martin," he said, and her name on his lips sounded both like a confirmation and a question. "Well, this is unexpected. Question for you, the moment of truth. What do you think is going through Julian's mind right now? Is he amused, annoyed, or something else entirely? I am on the edge of my seat and I can't wait to read your theories in the comments. If you're hooked, subscribing is the best way to make sure you don't miss the explosive next act." Elara's mind was a static storm. Thoughts collided and died in milliseconds. He knows I was desperate. He saw me at my lowest. Does he think this is some kind of trick? Should I run? But her feet were bolted to the floor. She met his gaze, her own shock warring with a sudden, defiant spark of resolve. She had come here to be seen for who she was. Well, here was her chance. Julian was the first to break the charged silence. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk, the picture of professional composure once more, though the glint in his eyes betrayed him. "Please, have a seat, Ms. Martin." She walked to the chair on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else and sat down, placing her portfolio on her lap like a shield. He sat down opposite her, leaning forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "So," he began, a hint of a genuine smile playing on his lips. "I believe we've already established you're not the type to do things for money." A flush crept up Elara's neck. "Mr. Vance, Julian," he corrected her gently. "And please, let's address the downpour in the room, shall we? I won't pretend last night didn't happen. But I also won't let it affect my judgment of your work. I'd like you to present your portfolio as you would to any other interviewer." It was a lifeline, but a complicated one. How could she pretend? The memory of his touch, the shared vulnerability under the awning, was a silent third party in the room. Taking a shaky breath, she opened her portfolio. "Of course, Mr. VA. Julian." She started to speak, her voice stiff and rehearsed at first, as she walked him through her early university projects. He listened intently, his gaze sharp and intelligent, occasionally asking a pointed question about her choice of materials or her structural philosophy. He was brilliant. He saw things in her designs, subtle influences, thematic through lines, that no professor ever had. He wasn't just looking, he was seeing. Slowly, her confidence returned. This was her passion. She forgot he was the CEO, the man from the rain. He was just someone who spoke her language. Then, they reached the final project, the community library. And the faint, wavy scar in the corner of the page. She faltered. He noticed immediately. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," she said, her voice small. "It's just a souvenir from yesterday's weather." He leaned closer, his eyes tracing the warped edge. He didn't look disappointed. He looked interested. Then his gaze lifted from the portfolio to her face. You mentioned you were trying to prove something to the person who inspired your dream. This was it. The moment of truth. She could give a polished, corporate answer. Or she could tell the truth. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, design with your whole heart. My mother, Ilara said, her voice quiet but clear. She was an architect, too. A brilliant one. But she gave it up to raise me. She always dreamed of going back, but she got sick. She took a breath, steeling herself. There's a 2-year gap on my resume. I left my job to be her full-time caregiver until she passed away. Those were the hardest and most important 2 years of my life. This portfolio, it's not just my work. It's a continuation of hers. It's the promise I made to her. She braced for the inevitable polite dismissal, the sympathetic but firm rejection. Instead, Julian was silent. He leaned back in his chair, his stormy gray eyes searching her face. The CEO mask was gone completely now. She saw only the man from the storm, the one who spoke of his father's legacy and shoes too large to fill. My father passed away 3 years ago, he said softly, his voice resonating with a deep, unexpected empathy. I took over the firm the next day. I never took a moment to grieve. I just worked. I tried to fill his shoes by becoming a ghost in his office. He gestured around the vast, impersonal room. I've been so focused on building a legacy of steel and glass, I think I forgot that what he really built was a home. For his employees. For the city. He looked at her, and the connection she'd felt in the rain returned, tenfold, a powerful, unspoken understanding passing between them. You didn't take a break from your career, Ilara, he said, her first name sounding natural and right. You were practicing the most important form of architecture there is. You were building a sanctuary for someone you loved. You were creating a space for a human story. That's not a gap on a resume. That's the soul of your design. Thank you, Ilara. That's all I need. Question for you, Ilara took a huge risk by being so vulnerable. In a world that often values strength and perfection, do you believe that sharing our vulnerabilities can actually be our greatest strength? Comment your thoughts below. Her fate is hanging in the balance, and I know you want to see what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed. Ilara walked out of the Vance and Sterling building in a daze. The city streets she had navigated in a storm of anxiety now felt dreamlike, unreal. The interview had been nothing like she'd expected. It had been more intimate, more terrifying, and more profound. She was sure she hadn't gotten the job. You don't bare your soul to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm and get hired. You don't connect over shared grief and parental legacies. You give firm handshakes and talk about 5-year plans. She had broken every rule. The finality in his voice, that's all I need, had echoed in her ears like a closing door. The next 2 days were a special kind of torture. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leaped into her throat. She replayed the interview 100 times, cringing at her honesty, then feeling a strange sense of peace about it. Whatever happened, she had been true to herself and to her mother's memory. It was a victory in its own right. On the 3rd day, her phone rang. The caller ID was an unknown number. Her hand trembled as she answered. Ilara Martin? Speaking. Ilara, it's Julian Vance. Her breath caught. He wasn't having HR make the call. He was doing it himself. This was it. The gentle letdown. Julian. Hello, she managed, her voice impossibly calm. I'm calling to apologize, he said. Her heart sank. Apologize for wasting your time. I apologize that it took me 2 days to sort out the details, he continued, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The position of junior architect is yours, if you want it. Ilara sank onto her sofa, speechless. Tears of relief pricked her eyes. Yes. Of course, I want it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me, he said, his tone turning more serious, more personal. I should be thanking you. I've interviewed dozens of candidates in the last month. They all had perfect resumes and perfect answers. They showed me blueprints. You showed me a soul. He paused. Last night, I went home and, for the first time in 3 years, I looked through my father's old sketches. The ones he drew by hand. And I remembered the man, not just the CEO. You reminded me of that. His next words sealed her future. I'm not just hiring an architect, Ilara. I'm hiring someone who understands that the strongest foundations aren't made of concrete, but of character. Someone who isn't afraid of a little rain. A few weeks later, Ilara stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office. It wasn't a corner office, but it had a stunning view of the city, her city. Her portfolio, with its battle scar, sat proudly on her new desk. The orchid from her apartment was on her windowsill, thriving in the morning light. She felt like she belonged. The door opened and Julian walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket, his sleeves were rolled up, and he looked less like a CEO and more like the man she had met in the storm. He handed her a cup, the warmth seeping into her hands. They stood side by side, looking out at the sprawling skyline. "It looks different from up here," she said softly. "It does," he agreed. "But it's still just a collection of stories. Ready to help me write a few new ones?" He looked at her, his stormy gray eyes now clear and full of a light she recognized as hope. A genuine smile spread across Alara's face, bright and full of promise. She thought of her mother, of the rain, of the long journey that had brought her to this exact moment. It wasn't an ending. It was a foundation. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's build something that lasts." Final question for you. The story ends on a promise to build something that lasts. What do you think they will build together, in their careers, and perhaps, in their lives? What does that phrase mean to you? Thank you so much for coming on this emotional journey with Alara and Julian. Your comments and thoughts have been the heart of this experience. If you loved this story and want to see more like it, the single best thing you can do is hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. Until next time. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more powerful political stories, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next.